I have chosen stage 6 of Erickson's psychological theory of development, intimacy, and isolation in relation to Frances' interview. Frances is the youngest of 7 children, all of her siblings being born in Italy except for her. She had 2 sisters old enough to be her mother, and throughout her life she felt slighted and ignored. Frances is now 86 years old, married for 63 years, with 3 children, 3 grandchildren. Erickson's Stage 6 Intimacy and Isolation in 8 life cycle stages is defined as young adults are looking for intimacy as closeness in their relationships. They learn to give and take with a significant other without sacrificing their identities. If they are unable to establish intimacy, they are at risk for isolation as they move into adulthood, according to the text, Human Behavior in the Social Environment. Stage 6 was a very important time in Frances' life. Many major life events happened during this stage, and Frances talked about it most of the time. I will now discuss the important experience Frances had during this stage, as well as her challenges and accomplishments. Frances' father died when she was 20 years old, and her older brother had to support her and her mother. Frances graduated Fashion Institute of Technology, a 2-year college, at 20 years old. She met her future husband, Arthur, at 21 and married at 23. Although she loved staying home with her children, she missed working and using her hard-earned knowledge. As the children got older, Frances took part-time jobs since money was tight. She worked in an underwear factory, tailor shop, and as a hat check girl, never using her degree again. During this stage, Frances and Art saved enough money to buy a 4-family house in the Bronx. Her niece and mother moved into the 4-family house. Frances and Art looked at houses near her sisters in New Jersey, and 3 of her sisters said, "You can't live here, you don't have enough money. We earned the right to live here, and you did not." This was a breaking point for Frances since she always felt slighted. She broke all ties with her 3 sisters and would not speak with them for 3 years. This was very upsetting to her mother, who was still alive. Luckily, the sisters made up before the mother passed away. Next, I will discuss the factors and events that facilitated and inhibited the relationship of the psychological crisis of Stage 6. According to Gillard and Higgs' article, Connecting Lifespan Development with the Sociological of Life course, A New Direction, intimacy is the transfer of emotional attachment away from the individual's family of origin towards a new and more stable peer relationship, a task that can only be successfully achieved once a stable sense of identity has emerged. During this stage, Frances left her family to move on to meeting Art, getting married, and starting her own family. One incident which Frances talked about was the way her sisters treated her during this time in her life. Growing up as the youngest of 7 children, Frances always felt slighted. This impacted Frances throughout her life, never feeling good enough. The final straw for Frances was during this stage in her life when her sisters said she did not deserve what they had. Frances grew up very poor in a tenement in the Bronx. 9 people lived in a small 3-bedroom apartment. Although she and Arthur and their 3 children lived in a 4-room apartment in the Bronx, they were able to buy the 4-family house they lived in. According to the Childhood Adversity article by Landis Ardell, Valiant, and Waldinger, the effects of childhood adversity, poverty being one, do not have an impact as a person gets older. Frances talked about growing up in poverty and how that helped her become more resilient as she matured. The article by Malone, Louis, Valiant, Retz, and Waldinger talks about how Erikson's adult psychological development outlines the significance of successful involvement within one's relationships, work, and community for health aging. The results of the study state that there is an initial support for the idea that individuals who are more engaged with different psychological domains in their lives may maintain better cognitive functioning into old age, in part because they are less depressed. Next, I will discuss biopsychological factors in Frances's life during stage 6. Her gender impacted her life in a negative way as she saw it. As stated, she went to college, graduated with a 2-year degree, and then went to work. She loved her work, but stopped once she and Art had children. It was expected during this time she grew up in. Frances talked about her education and job made her feel good about herself, and the study by Wyborn, Sneed, and Sayers result indicated that midlife women gain self-confidence and determination through their jobs, which made them feel more competent and effective. Frances talked about losing her sense of competence when she left work to have children. Again, she emphasized she loved being a mom, but missed the positive feelings of her work. Frances talked about how when she had to go back to work part-time to help with finances, although hard with the family, she felt empowered. Frances always loved to work and had done so since she was 13 years old. Frances talked about feeling oppressed by her large family and especially 3 of her sisters. The oppression she felt continued throughout her life, but came to a head with the incident that led to her not speaking with her sisters for 3 years. Frances also felt oppressed by the times she wanted a career and loved her work, but as stated previously, she got married, had children, and stayed home to raise them. I would like to summarize Frances's life through the multi-systems lens. Frances's family had a huge impact on her life. Being the youngest of 7, never feeling good enough, never getting enough attention, Frances believed helped her become a resilient person. The Landes, Ardelt, Valiant, and Waldinger article talked about how the quality of familial relationships and the social context during childhood are likely to shape their life, psychological, and health outcomes. Frances's family during her formative years did not shape her psychological and health outcomes. She became resilient and worked hard with Art to support their children and dreams. Frances made sure to say that although she felt alone much of the time due to the differences in age of her siblings, and that her parents were much older when they had her, She had a strong family bond. She felt her family loved her even if they did not know how to show it much of the time. As for how social policy and institutions shaped her life, Frances grew up in a time when marriage was an institution that everyone expected women to enter. Social policy affected her ability to continue working once she had children. Women did not do that at the time. Although Frances did fulfill one of her dreams, graduating college, even though that was also looked down upon by an old world Italian family and larger society. The Gillard and Higgs article, Connecting Lifespan Development, talks about Erikson's model of emergence. Erikson talks about emergence as a new stage of development which is initiated as a specific point in time, personal, social, and biological time. Although emergence may happen during a particular time in one's life, Erikson believed that resolution can happen throughout one's life, reactivated at various times depending on various personal and social events that touch upon the identities accepted and identities that were rejected. I think throughout Frances's life, various events helped to reshape her outlook. She said that losing her father so young, raising children in the 60s and 70s in the inner city, watching her children grow into adults, and then helping to raise her grandchildren into adults, watching all of her siblings die and being the last one left, all shaped the way she grew throughout life. One big identity change event happened when her last sister died. Suddenly, baby Frances was the matriarch of the family. She was the one that the nieces and nephews and their children went to for advice. She was the one who set up family parties and events. Frances's role changed from baby to matriarch, and with that, identity changed. I would like to address the humanistic model in relation to Frances's life. The humanistic model focus is the individual and their own development. The humanistic model has a strong base in philosophy and is tied to Eastern beliefs such as Zen Buddhism, Hinduism, and Islam, taken from the text. Frances shaped her own life from her 20s to early 40s. She learned to live without her father, went to college, worked, got married, and had children, and raised them, bought a house, and went back to work. These experiences with how she felt during this time helped shape Frances's life. She felt for the first time in her life capable and important. Frances finally became her own person during this time due to her hard work on herself. The humanistic belief is that people are active agents in their lives. One limitation in the psychological development theory in relation to Frances's life is that the theory does not account for flexibility of individual differences in one's life.